Welcome to the Second Call Defense podcast. I'm Dean Reek, and I'm joined by Sean Maloney, defense attorney and co-founder of Second Call Defense, the world's most comprehensive legal and financial protection for armed self-defense. What have you been up to lately?
I've been busy getting ready for my annual Butler County Friends of the Shooting Sports Foundation banquet. I regularly have a banquet every year to raise money to support the local 4-H clubs, high schools that have trap and skeet teams, and other local clubs and organizations that teach gun safety and get our youth into the shooting sports.
How long have you been doing that?
Probably 15 or 16 years now, I bet. Time flies when you're having fun.
Now, that's sort of like, we've done the bash, the Buckeye Bash. Is it something like that? Banquet and raffles and...
Yeah, we'll have gun auctions, gun raffles, wall of guns, not unlike the Friends of the NRA banquets, which I ran for years, and this is sort of like that. It's closely ran like that. The only difference being is 100% of the money now is kept by our foundation for use locally and statewide to support our mission, which is gun safety and teaching our youth.
Well, that's really interesting. So where's that going to be held?
It's March 4th, starts at 5:30 in Receptions Banquet Center in Fairfield. And if anybody wants to Google Butler County Friends of Youth Shooting Sports, you can get more information, or feel free to call me, 513-484-0142, and I'll talk to you.
Wow, so, giving out your phone number on the podcast.
It's an important mission. It's our future, Dean.
People want to get some more information about this. We also ran an article on our website and has a lot of info on where it is, how you can sign up, and there's a sign-up sheet, and then you're running a special raffle in advance that you took a Henry rifle and I guess made it a custom.
Yeah, we customized a Henry Golden Boy, and we have a rather well-known sheriff, Richard K. Jones, who's been very active and is pro-gun sheriff. And actually, years ago, started invoicing the federal government for all the illegals he was housing in his prison. And so that's kind of how he got well known. And he's a colorful character. He's a great pro-gun person. And so he commissioned a one-of-a-kind gun, and it was laser engraved. And he's going to draw the winner at the banquet. So you can also buy those tickets online where you posted the article. And it has several links, so you can buy tickets to the banquet and then all the raffle tickets you want for the Henry Golden Boy.
Yeah, those Henrys are really beautiful. They look like you ought to frame them instead of shoot them.
I know that's one thing I said I would never own a firearm that I wouldn't shoot, but I'd be hard pressed to shoot a Golden Boy because they are pretty.
So again, if you want some information on that, we have an article on our website, and I think we had something on our newsletter as well. So I'm hoping a bunch of people show up and you can support the shooting sports in your area, Sean. That's a really good cause.
Well, I appreciate your help, Dean. Also, thank you very much.
So, Sean, what I wanted to talk about on this podcast was a couple of legal things that have been in the news recently. The big one, of course, is the Remington settlement. This has just been all over the news. The media's been salivating about this story. And the way this is being presented is that Remington Arms has agreed to a $73 million settlement. And just to remind everyone, this is coming off of the Sandy Hook Elementary School murders that happened in Newtown, Connecticut about 10 years ago. I think it was December 2012. 20 students died, 6 educators died. And I'm not going to name the kid who did it because I don't like to make killers famous. He had a Bushmaster, among other guns, which was actually his mother's firearm. I think all the firearms belonged to his mother. Went into the school, killed a bunch of people, and then 2 years later there was a lawsuit brought by the families of the people in the school against Remington Arms. And I guess their contention was that the firearms manufacturer, Remington, was responsible because they were not promoting public safety. They were promoting profit over safety. At least that was their claim. Now, the thing I want to clear up here, because this is not clear in the stories, is that Remington is not actually agreeing to this settlement. The company that we know as Remington Arms does not actually exist anymore. They filed for bankruptcy in 2020, and all the assets were sold off. So Remington still exists as a brand, but it's actually owned and operated by several different companies. What's actually happening, Sean, and correct me if I'm wrong, but there were insurers, just, every company has various kinds of insurance, and I'm assuming this is liability insurance, but there were four companies where they had insurance policies, and it's these insurance companies that have agreed to the $73 million payout because that was what it adds up to when you look at the coverage that they had. So Remington has not admitted to guilt or any wrongdoing. They don't even exist anymore. And so the insurance companies are making the payout. So what do you think about all this, Sean?
Well, you're correct, Dean. I can remember when the lawsuit was first filed, and I remember probably 2 years ago when the Connecticut court decided that this suit could go forward based on the theory of unfair labor or unfair trade practices with the advertising. And I can probably pretty much guarantee you that if Remington Firearms was still in existence, this settlement never would have occurred. But now that they're gone and the insurance companies are standing around, they want it over with, and so they just pay out to whatever the max of the claim were and move on with their life. But if Remington was still there, they would have taken this to court, and whatever decision would have been, then the United States Supreme Court could decide on it, because this was brought up. The decision of the Connecticut courts was appealed to the United States Supreme Court, and they decided not to hear it because they wanted the lawsuit to go forward. Then, after the lawsuit was over, it would be ripe, so to speak, and then they would make their decision if they so chose to. Now, because there's a settlement and never went to trial, kind of the Protection of Lawful Commerce Arms Act is a little bit in question, but there's not going to be a lot more of these lawsuits out there because it was a stretch, and the Connecticut court, I think, improperly ruled when they made their decision, but it's going to stand because there's nobody left to appeal.
So you mentioned the Protection of Lawful Commerce and Arms Act. We should just explain this was a federal law passed back in 2005 under the Bush administration. And even back that far, there was this new strategy that was being discussed where, okay, we can't get legislators to do what we want with gun control, so let's just sue gun manufacturers out of existence. And so they passed this law, Republicans did, to protect the gun manufacturers and saying, look, you can sue them just like you can sue car manufacturers or whatever if there's a defective product, but you can't sue a manufacturer for the illegal use of their product. So you can't sue Ford or Chevrolet if someone uses a car to run down a bunch of people and kill them. That's obviously not their fault. By the same token, you can't go to Remington or any other company and sue them because somebody decides to use the firearms to murder a bunch of people. So I think a lot of people always assume that you were never going to be able to sue, and yet they found this, I'll call it a loophole in Connecticut, where they could get around this act.
Well, and they tried for years. They had the attorneys for the families in Connecticut at Sandy Hook. Motion after motion, theory after theory was turned down and thrown out by the courts. And then somehow, they got the idea of using Connecticut's Unfair Trade Practices Act, and then got a court that was very favorable and was very liberal when they interpreted what that law stated. So I doubt that any other state would come up with that same holding, but you never know what's out there. But you're absolutely right. That was a theory that Bloomberg and his people started introducing in all the state courts. Hey, we'll sue the gun manufacturers out of existence. I mean, and like you said, it's like me having too much to drink, getting in my Ford, killing somebody, and you're suing Ford for my criminal act. And that's something that's ridiculous. And it should apply evenly across the board. It doesn't matter whether it's a firearm, a car, or what it is. You can't hold the manufacturer responsible for a third party's individual criminal acts.
Now, Sean, I'm going to talk negatively about attorneys here, so nothing personal, but this whole thing struck me as a predatory lawsuit because these lawyers kept coming out and saying, this is not about the money, it's not about the money. But if this is not going to set a precedent, if this case is not about finding a way to actually sue manufacturers, I mean, it seems to me this really is about the money. And I can see that attorneys out there are going to start looking through the marketing materials of all kinds of firearm companies, seeing if they can bring other class action suits. I mean, do you see that happening?
I agree with you 100%. It's about the money. They wouldn't have kept going if they didn't think they had the money, because they're not going to push a losing lawsuit. That's just poor business, number one. And then number two, when they found the chink in the armor, so to speak, or somehow discovered that maybe the court would listen to the Connecticut Unfair Trade Practices Act, that pushed them a little bit further. But like I said, for years and years and years, they had loss after loss, and then all of a sudden they had the opportunity to get money from an insurance company from a now defunct firearms manufacturer. So you're absolutely right. In my view, it's about the money.
And Biden is out there, of course, cheering them on and saying they hope that they pursue efforts to replicate the success of this in other states. And we'll see if that actually happens. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw some other lawsuits, or at least people trying to do this. But it's really just predatory, and it always has been.
It always has been, and let's go, Brandon.
So the other sad thing about this, of course, and this is what's not making it into a lot of these stories, the defunct Remington company. I think a lot of people probably don't know. Remington, as I said earlier, just doesn't exist anymore. This was an old company started in 1816 up in New York, and Remington, as we know it, does not exist. There's a new company called Rem Arms based in the same place. So they're manufacturing firearms, and it's under the Remington brand. But there's also Remington Outdoors. That was bought up by Vista Outdoors. Mm-hmm. So that's where the ammo is going to go. And a bunch of outdoor products sold by them. The Bushmaster rifle, I guess, was bought up by Franklin Armory out in Nevada. And to my knowledge, those are being sold right now. And then there's Marlin, a line of lever-action rifles, which was actually purchased by Ruger, which is really interesting. So all these pieces of Remington are still out there. And if you're not following the news, you probably don't know that Remington's not behind them anymore. But it's all these other companies that are actually using these brands and continuing to sell these products.
Well, CZ owns a lot of the plans and manufactures some of them. Different people bought their muzzleloading division. Different people bought their handguns. So you're absolutely right. It was a total breakup. And most, if not all, of Remington was purchased in some form and is being recreated. That was part of our ammunition problem. Remington was one of the largest manufacturers of ammunition in America, if not the world. And all of a sudden they went away, and the demand with all the gun sales, and they left a void. And I believe the people that purchased that, Vista, it has their factory up and running. And then I'm also aware of the fact that some of their firearms are currently being produced, and the Model 700 will be out shortly if it's not out yet. So like you said, people didn't realize it wasn't there. So when you say Remington settled, well, no, Remington didn't. The insurance companies did, and that was all that was left.
It's really sad when you look at the firearms industry. The firearms industry is actually pretty small. That's why that federal law was passed to protect them, because it's not like Facebook, or it's not like Google, or it's not like some of these companies that have super deep pockets. These lawsuits can bankrupt them, and so that's why that law was passed. And we've seen since 2005, when that federal law was passed, we've seen a lot of these companies get gobbled up by larger companies. So it's not a lot of individual companies out there anymore. Like Vista Outdoors is a pretty big outfit, and they're buying up all these brands. So there's a lot of consolidation happening out there. And so I'm not sure what that means for lawsuits going forward, but I'm glad that we have that federal law. Otherwise, the firearms industry could have been sued out of existence by now.
Well, Dean, and it's the fact that we even need the Protection of Lawful Commerce and Arms Act is a testament to how the Second Amendment and that constitutional right, the right to keep and bear arms, is treated so much differently than everything else. Whether it's the First Amendment, the Third, the Fourth, the Sixth, and the 10th, it's constantly under attack. Has to have special provisions just to protect us from people trying to take that away. And I think it's a testament to how we have to be vigilant to make sure that the Second Amendment continues to exist for future generations.
Well, Sean, the other big story, not quite as big, but I find really interesting, is the Alec Baldwin story. It wasn't that long ago that this was in the news. He was filming a movie called Rust. He was one of the producers and also the star of the movie. And I want to be careful how I say this because, this is still an ongoing investigation. Allegedly, he pulled a firearm from a holster and shot a cinematographer. She died, and the director was also shot. I guess he was shot in the clavicle because he was standing next to her or right behind her. And so there was a wrongful death suit that's now been brought against Baldwin, which I predicted he was going to get sued eventually. And so it's against him, the various production companies involved, producers, crew members, and basically everyone's suing everyone. And the lawsuit alleges that there were safety violations by Baldwin and others. So I know that you've read some of these stories. What are your thoughts on all of this and what it's going to mean for Baldwin and the entertainment business?
Dean, if the basic rules of gun safety would have been followed, what everybody learns as a child from Eddie the Eagle, from what everybody learns in a basic pistol class or a hunter safety class, if the rules of gun safety or gun handling would have been followed, we wouldn't even be talking about this. Just the fundamental rules of gun safety weren't followed. You point a gun and you pull the trigger at another human being, something that you don't want to destroy, and you have no idea and you haven't personally checked whether the gun is loaded or unloaded. It's ridiculous. Right from the beginning, if Alec Baldwin didn't spend so much time attacking the NRA and trying to tear the NRA down and just would have took a few NRA safety courses, he would be much better off. In fact, in some of the articles that I read, he basically turned down a cross gun draw safety training course and basically said, I'm not going to do it. And then didn't use rubber guns or wouldn't use anything else like that, wanted to use the real firearm. So it's a criminal investigation still going on. There's civil lawsuits swirling. And if it was anybody else, he probably would already be charged criminally, at least with involuntary manslaughter, which is an unintentional killing as a result of criminal negligence and pointing a gun, not knowing if it's loaded or unloaded at somebody and pulling the trigger. Certainly is criminal negligence in my view. And then, he's made a couple different statements. The first statements, he said, I didn't know the gun had live ammunition and I didn't mean for it to go off. And then his next statement was, oh, I didn't pull the trigger. I would never point a gun at anyone and pull the trigger. Well, we all know that it takes a trigger pull, especially with the single action handguns he was using. Not only did he have to pull the trigger, but he had to cock the hammer. And then after he cocks the hammer, you're probably only looking at a 3-pound trigger. So it'd been easy for him to pull that trigger and cause the problems that he did. And it's a shame for the family. It's a tragedy. And hopefully the good that can come out of this is that gun safety on these movie sets or anywhere firearms are being used or purportedly being used, it has to be paramount.
It just strikes me as really strange that, in Hollywood, they really don't like guns, because they're always attacking the NRA. They claim that, guns are bad and people who own guns are bad and all that sort of thing. But you look at the movie posters. Anytime there's a gun, the actor always has their finger on the trigger. Mm-hmm. And it does not seem that they really promote gun safety, which they should. They wouldn't even have to get political about it. You could just make sure that the finger is in the proper spot on the posters and in all the publicity, mm-hmm. and in the movies and the TV shows. Do it the right way, but it's never done that way. So that makes me wonder what protocols are actually on the set and how safe they really are. Like you said, if the gun is not pointed at someone, you're not going to get hurt. If your finger's not on the trigger, right, you're not going to get hurt. Obviously, this gun was pointed at that cinematographer and the trigger was pulled. I've seen no allegation that the gun was defective in any way. Right. I mean, have you seen that in any of the stories?
No, I haven't heard that in any of the stories, and I certainly haven't read that. Of course, that's probably going to be what someone's trying to say, and then someone's going to test that firearm, and invariably they're not going to get it to go off laying on a table by itself, because it never does. This isn't the first time. You go back to Brandon Lee, and you would think they would learn. They make so much money off of firearms in the movies, yet they attack us, the law-abiding gun owners. They truly exist. The majority of movies that portray violence with firearms, that's exactly what they do is they use the firearms to make their money, to get the excitement. But like you said, they have no idea what they're doing. I often just watch the gun handling so I can stop it and drive my wife crazy and say, see, the fingers on the trigger, they're pointing at somebody, all the fundamentals of gun safety that aren't being done. Or cocking a striker fired firearm, which with a cocking sound always makes me smile.
Or with shotguns, how many times do they rack it before they actually shoot somebody? I mean, I do the exact same thing. And, I try not to be that way because if I'm watching a movie, I want to enjoy it. But it's hard not to get past that kind of stuff when they're just obviously being stupid.
Well, and they're not being safe, and that's what this Baldwin incident has taught us. I mean, I can't imagine. I know you can't imagine, and probably the vast majority of listeners who have any firearms experience at all, if we handed them a gun and said, "This thing is unloaded. I promise you, it's unloaded. I want you to point it at me and pull the trigger," they won't do it. I wouldn't do it, and you wouldn't do it, and I don't think I could do it. I couldn't bring myself to do that, and to turn down safety courses and then to point a firearm at somebody and pull the trigger, not having personally inspected it to know whether it's loaded or unloaded, is unexcusable.
Yeah, I mean, I've a lot of the statements that have come out on this, Baldwin he's denied responsibility. He said that the gun was handed to him and he was told it was a cold gun, meaning that there's no real ammo in it. He says that he was not responsible for checking the gun. That's just not his job. He said the gun, quote unquote, went off. How many times have we seen that in the newspapers where there's an accidental discharge and someone says, well, it just went off? He says he didn't pull the trigger. He didn't aim it at the director. He's making all of these claims. And it just makes me wonder, why wouldn't everyone have responsibility? I mean, you and I both know, as you were just saying, if I hand you a firearm, I'm going to check it, and then I'm going to give it to you, and you're going to check it. If you give it right back to me, that very moment, you're going to check it again and I'm going to check it again. I mean, there's a ridiculous amount of safety that goes into normal protocols if you're doing it right. And why wouldn't they do that on a movie set?
Well, and they're intentionally, volitionally ignorant. They choose not to learn. They choose not to take a basic pistol class or whatever their gun safety classes are because apparently they're better than the rest of us or for whatever reason. And because they don't have any clue of the safe handling of firearms, they don't realize probably they're ignorant. They're not stupid. They're ignorant on how to handle a firearm, and they don't know what they're doing is wrong. Certainly, you can't really give them that much of a benefit of the doubt because Baldwin knew. I mean, he turned down gun safety training because he didn't need that. So,
I think Sean, the really damning information, if it's being reported correctly, is that it's not just involving Baldwin, but I guess there are these, I'll just call them rumors because, I don't know what really happened. I'm just reading these news stories. But crew members apparently had lodged complaints previous to this incident and saying that there were as many as 15 different safety violations. They were complaining about real guns being used. They were complaining about real ammo being on the set. All of this apparently was happening prior to this accident. And so there are all these different lawsuits going on. I think that's the thing that's really going to get them. It wasn't that just something just happened. There was complaint after complaint after complaint that there were other discharges on the set of this movie. So my prediction at this point is that I don't know what's going to happen with the criminal investigation, but certainly with this civil lawsuit, my guess is that there's going to be a judgment on this, and Baldwin and some of the other producers are going to get dinged pretty hard on this because obviously there were some pretty bad things going on.
Yeah, and I read the same things that there were discharges in the past that members of the crew had walked off the set because it was so unsafe because of the firearms. And I think it was such a low budget film. I'm not sure how much insurance they have. So hopefully it goes in the pockets of people like Baldwin, and they pay the price for their ignorance and for what they did.
So now just explain the difference between a civil suit and a criminal suit, because right now we're talking about a civil lawsuit. I guess simultaneously there's still a criminal investigation going on, but how do those two things differ?
You have the criminal investigation, and generally speaking, civil suits won't be filed until the criminal investigation is done, because if you're convicted criminally, it's considered in the civil side of things to be negligence per se. Which, yep, it's negligent. You're guilty of negligence. Now the only question is proximate cause and damages. So you go through the criminal portion first, and if they're charged and convicted, then it makes the civil that much easier. But the civil part or the criminal part is a violation of the state statutes or federal statutes, as it may be, and then there's a trial, investigation, and trial based on that, and then it's criminal penalties, whether it comes down to probation, in-house arrest, or actually imprisonment. And then, of course, the civil side of things, it's all about money. You're punishing them by hurting their pocketbooks, by trying to make the person whole again, the family of the dead producer whole. So there'd be monetary damages awarded to the family. And then there's lawsuits for infliction of emotional distress for some of the crew members that were there. So we'll end up seeing what happens. And I even saw that there's a lawsuit by the armor against the dummy ammunition manufacturer, alleging that there was live rounds mixed in with the dummy ammunition. So everybody's suing everybody. I think a lot of it's going to be cover. But first, I believe that we'll see if there's going to be criminal charges, and then those will be prosecuted and brought to the end, and then the civil case will take over after that. And if they don't decide to no bill or there's no charges filed, the civil cases will start up immediately, and that's where the compensation, and then of course the punitive damages that punish them for what they've done.
So, what kind of dollar figures could we be looking at in a case like this?
Well, it's hard to say, but you're probably given Hollywood and given the deep pockets, and if they have the insurance like they should, you're probably looking at hundreds of millions of dollars before it's all said and done.
And there can be multiple suits at the same time, right? And it's, in other words, right. Baldwin could be sued 5, 6 different times, whatever, yep, by different people, and they're all separate cases, right?
Absolutely. Different actions are being brought, be brought against him, being brought against the movie, and I imagine the armorer who was in charge, who was there to make sure things are done safety, is going to be sued also at the same time with Baldwin. So everybody will be sued. And again, you're right. Baldwin could be sued by several different people and entities.
I'm a big movie fan. I'm at the theater quite a bit. Even during this whole pandemic thing, I never let that stop me. I've been there. I've been out to movies when I was sitting there all by myself because everyone else was out in the park masked up or whatever, and I was still watching movies or whatever movies were still in the theaters. And so I feel really bad that this is going on, and I know that this is going to have an effect on the production of movies, but I have to say that I'm kind of hoping that there's a really big settlement here or a really big win, because this is the kind of thing that can change the safety practices in the movies.
Of the industry, you're absolutely right.
Right. Because it doesn't seem to me, not that I work in the movie business, but it doesn't seem to me that like the protocols are strict enough, and something like this could really change the entire industry where they become a lot more strict if they're going to use actual firearms in movies.
It's all about the money. It comes on there too, and if you start hitting Hollywood's pocketbook also, they're going to have to get safe, and it could be done safely. It could be just as realistic. Again, it was the basic fundamentals of gun safety we're talking about. Nothing any more complicated than always keeping the gun pointed in the safety direction and never pull the trigger and aim the gun at something you're not willing to destroy. I always tell my students right off when I teach a basic pistol class, if you always keep the gun pointed in the safe direction, it doesn't matter how many other stupid things you do, because nobody will ever get hurt.
So I understand why they want to use actual firearms if it's a close-up, or if they're shooting a gun and they need the recoil and the flash and all of that. But, you could use dummy guns for a lot of just the basic handling or as a prop, and then have an actual firearm only in a few parts of the movie. That could be done to reduce the number of times that you have an actual, what I would call, a live firearm situation where you have to have all of these other protocols. So you're right. I think that they could do it if they wanted to do it. And in this film, it looks like they were cutting a lot of corners. Right. So my prediction is that there's going to be some kind of a win here. And I'm hoping it's big enough to make a difference and they change their protocols. That's
how things change by civil suits when you make them feel the pain in their pocketbook. And I know Hollywood can do it. I saw Tupac Shakur in a movie a couple years ago, and he's been dead for 15 years. So Hollywood can do anything.
Well, Sean, appreciate your being on the podcast. Good luck with your dinner coming up. I am going to come down. I've never been there before. I hope a bunch of people sign up, and I guess I'll see you in a couple weeks.
Thanks, Dean.
That's it for the podcast. If you're not yet a member of Second Call Defense, you can join anytime at secondcalldefense.org. Use the promo code PODCAST, that's PODCAST, to get your first month free. Until next time, this is Dean Reek and Sean Maloney for Second Call Defense. Stay safe.